still at the rename here.
Unmute Ken's mic.
He's on mute. Jay, you're on mute.
Yes, you can't do that. You can't do that.
Oh, I can't.
No. You can only unmute yourself. Let's
Go into chat and say he's on mute. Click on chat.
Kathy, turn your mic off.
We're not hearing Jay.
Tell Jay to start over again.
You seen that? What could possibly go wrong? Okay. Okay, can you block out the extra pictures? Boy, this is fun. You know, I picked this topic because I thought it would be appropriate. So anyway, as I was saying, oh no, back out, back around, back out. Come on, you're stepping on my coattails here. Geez, Marie. So my theme was what could possibly go wrong because we're learning. And I thought I would pick just a couple of examples and then reassure you and reassure Ken that it's okay if things don't work. So if I could have the first slide, please, now. Now here's an example of a bad social experience. This is a famous Livermore citizen, a retired businessman, a member of Rotary, a philanthropist, and you have to ask what went wrong. He might have stayed at the office party too long. That's one possibility. For all we know, he is preparing this costume for an event in Nepal, where we don't go very often, but this might have significance. There is that, or the third one is, if you check in the media, today is in fact Media Pride Day in San Francisco, and he's a very empathetic person, so he might have just been trying out his costume to wear in the parade to support the people in Gay Pride Day, which I think is a wonderful thing. Yes, yes. Well, copies of this will be available as you leave, all right? I think this picture is going to have immortality. Now, if I could have the next slide. This is a bad work experience. This is a well-known Livermore winemaker, entrepreneur, a young businessman, and it's clear that something has gone wrong. Maybe he was late on delivery, or maybe the customers were returning this in a very aggressive mode, but he is clearly not having a good day. So something went wrong here, okay? It's actually truly a wonderful picture, a tribute to Photoshop. I didn't make it. So finally, let me close by simply saying what is important to remember. We're Rotary. We learn from our mistakes and errors. We laugh with and at each other. And both of those are important, with and at. We enjoy that. We attempt new things, expecting to learn. Today, we're venturing on a very new thing. If we stumble, mercy forbid, we might stumble. Imagine what we will learn. Nothing can go wrong today. Thank you.
Would it be possible to replay the song? We all missed it.
TJ, maybe we'll try and execute that at the end of the meeting. So for folks on Zoom that may not have heard, we got a request from the audience here to replay the Songster's song this morning because they missed the beginning of it. So maybe we'll see if we can execute that at the end of our meeting today. So, wow. So back, getting a little ahead on the slides here. Whoa, what's happening? Hang in there, people. We'll figure this out. Okay, so I think where we were at is, yeah, the front line, all the people that make these meetings go. And we just made that job massively more difficult than it used to be, right? We're trying to execute this both live and virtually. So much thanks to everybody that's been working on this, trying to make that happen. Pat Coyle holding down the Zoom host duties today. Tim Berry documenting this for posterity, right? Someday we're gonna laugh, right? We're gonna look back at this and laugh. Alan Frank helping set up the technology. Alan spent a ton of time trying to get this all dialed in, and I really appreciate all his efforts there. Mr. Rounds, our chat monitor, thank you, David. And just, you know, something to figure out. I can't seem to access my chat here, so I can't really see what's going on there. We may need some help later on if we've got questions. So Kathy, thank you very much for being our Spur publisher this week. So I just want to say a couple of things real quick before we jump into the next thing. Again, I appreciate your patience as we try and figure this out. Very much appreciate Jay's thought for the date today. By all means, give us feedback, right? We're trying to figure this out. We realize there's going to be lots of opportunities for improvement. We want to hear from everybody. All honest feedback is welcome and appreciated, but please, people, be kind, right? We're trying to figure this out. So the other thing that I want to say before I get too sidetracked is the world seems crazy right now, right? And to me, the world has never needed Rotary more than it needs Rotary right now. Whether it's hurricanes, fires, earthquakes, there's a lot of people in a world of hurt right now. I think Rotary is so well positioned to help, right? So I encourage you guys to think about shelter box, anything, right? There's lots of different ways that we can help. I just want to acknowledge that. We've got California on fire, right? I think there's going to be a lot of our neighbors in the state that are going to need some help. So buckle up, Rotarians, right? We're going to get busy on serving humanity this year, right? Lots of opportunities to help. So just my aside. At this point, I want to introduce any visiting Rotarians. And I'm going to need some help here. Somebody on the Zoom side, if we have visiting Rotarians on the Zoom side, Pat, you're our Zoom host. Can you let us know if there's somebody out there, a visiting Rotarian?
You know, I must confess, Narayan, I don't know if you're a Rotarian or a citizen, but we appreciate having you
hear
here.
you on this end. Hang on a second while we adjust our volume here and see.
Well, to be honest, Pat, I don't know whether I'm, into it or not.
Can we have a guest? We have Narayan Vishwanathan
Right.
is a guest today.
Yeah.
Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you. So I sent the paperwork or whatnot to Sonia like day before yesterday, I guess, and so that's where I am, and somewhere in limbo land. But I, she did give me the invite, so I thought just let me just be and see what's going on, and because I've never been in Rotary or any of those. But to be honest, I'm a pure corporate guy, and so it was just one of those things where I think slowly I have to also start doing something other than just making money for myself and the company. So,
welcome to Rotary. We are glad you came.
Yeah. So
We're in the
Ryan,
process, Narayan.
Thank you for coming and welcome. And especially, wow, when you've never seen us in action, this is a crazy view, right? So we appreciate
and next time maybe what I do is I'll probably stop in. I work in Pleasanton. I live right across where Sonia is in Livermore. So I'll probably stop in there. Unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, every Wednesday, I have a call at 12:45, right? For some of us, So maybe I can spend half an hour there and take the other call remotely next time around. So that's what I'm going to do, so that, you know, it's always good to put a name on the face or face on the name and see people personally. And so that's what I'm going to do next time. So unfortunately, you guys have to excuse me in a couple of minutes. I have to run to the other meeting, and we'll go from there.
All right, well, welcome. Any other visiting guests? Any other guests here? I don't see guests here.
I don't see any.
So Alan thinks I don't have enough mics here, so lots of mics. Okay, so apologies if I've missed anyone. We'll continue to get better at this stuff, but welcome all of our guests. So at this point, Alan, if you could tee up the next slide. Again, in celebration of our 75th anniversary of the Rotary Club of Livermore this year, I'd like to have Mike Thompson step up and share some moments, some memories with us. So welcome, Mike.
I don't see a mic. I guess there's enough light to read.
That microphone.
Is that okay? Okay. I guess so. Yep. Diamond Memories. Just after Ken asked me to do this, the next morning, I thought, in 1990, when I was president, by surprise at our meeting at the old Holiday Inn, in walks Miss Universe 1989 with her diamond tiara on. And I remember her kissing Jasper Steele on the head. But that was, I don't know who, what, and why, but she showed up at our meeting. I think she was maybe doing some social service or something, I'm not sure. The other things I remember are the many crab feeds we had, particularly the early days at the Pleasanton Fairgrounds, where we, at least 20 of us, would be dancing until 1 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, we've aged, those days don't seem to happen now. And the Reno train trips that some of you still remember were also a lot of fun. And that was a district-wide event. And Ben Hastings, with his impish face, telling jokes. I'm sure some of you still remember Ben. And then Mel Nelson, who was president prior to me, one of our former police chiefs. He was, as I recall, the first president. It was his year that we started to look at International Foundation more seriously. Prior to that, we were more focused locally. And then beginning of my year, November '89, Loma Prieta earthquake occurred. And I had planned to have an auction for our local foundation. And this occurred, so myself and Master Gilmore and one other person who I can't recall met for lunch. And in 30 days, we put on our first auction at the Holiday Inn, gave us the room and food as a donation. And in that 1 month, it was a Thursday night, the past presidents all dressed up as Santa Claus and with the servers. We made a little over $30,000, which I thought was a wonderful accomplishment in so short a time. Then we went on to raise another $35,000 for earthquake relief. We gave some to the Red Cross, but a heavy portion of it we gave to the Watsonville Rotary Club for their area. And we're winding down. Now our support of the International Foundation and the many other projects has really become very evident. And I suspect that per person average, we're probably the biggest giver in our district. And I'm sure Pat can tell us that, because I know the other club is probably larger than ours. So I think we've become very generous in that area, and hopefully we will take that same enthusiasm with our local foundation, which is also dear to me. But we started so many other things. As my brother mentioned, it was much easier for us to be president when we were. I think we had about 110,000 members when I was president, so not much different in that regard, but we did nothing like we do now. All the different projects we've got, the dictionary program, the Nepalese Children's Fund, the music scholarships, Ready program. I mean, it goes on, which I think is wonderful. And I'm convinced, as I've said several times, that if you look at our club and all we do, we have to rate in the top probably 0.5% in the world when you consider everything that we do. And my belief, though, on the other side of this is that we need maybe a little more balance, a little more social activities. I started the mystery night and then the mystery golf week or weekend as it was then. I think we could maybe look, and we had the fall barbecue. It's good to mix pleasure with fundraising. Our crab feed affords that, but I'd like to see us do more of that. Thank you. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you, Mike. What Mike forgot to mention is in his comments there about his thoughts that our club should have more fun. Mike raised his hand and volunteered recently to take lead on putting together a 75th anniversary celebration dinner for our club that we're going to have in February. So stay tuned for that. That should be fun, and we'll have more information on that as we get closer to do that. Again, this club has a long history of doing a lot of good in our community, in the world, and look forward to what comes next, right? What do the next 75 years look like? So a couple of announcements. So Kathy, do you want to tell us about the upcoming district avenues of service?
Yes, I would. Actually, I wish the registration was available online at this moment, but it should be online later today. This is going to be a 2-day event, as you can see. We're calling this the in-person meeting Hybrid Saturday. It's going to be a live streaming event, and we're hoping to have a large group of Rotarians there because it is at the Alameda Cattle Fairgrounds. The admission is $50 because it includes lunch, and that covers some of the other costs with the county, with the fairgrounds. So I think that there's,
we just had a breakthrough here.
Oh, I'm in outer space. Da, 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 da.
Yeah, maybe on the quiet side.
Okay, wow.
That's good.
Should I whisper?
I don't think you have to whisper, just quiet.
Okay. I think the club may subsidize part or all of this. Is that correct?
I think so.
Okay, please register. It's a Saturday event. It's going to be great. It's a Hawaiian theme. So there may be even some spam, real spam, not email spam. And so more to come, but the registration should come to your mailbox from the district, and you can just click to register. How's that?
Right.
That's it. It's a little awkward here. It's a little awkward here, but thank you, Ken.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So next announcement. So I learned something about Marianne today. Evidently, one of Marianne's hobbies is being a hurricane chaser. She's stuck in New Orleans today and wasn't able to join us. She's trying to find a flight back home. So she did ask that I share with all of you, though, just the reminder that mini grant applications are due next week, a week from today, right? September 8th. So if you know people in the community that could use a little help encourage them to get those applications in. And maybe next week we'll find out more about how Mary Ann's trip was, right? It sounds like it's going to be interesting. So next up, Christian, do you want to give us a quick update on what's going on community service?
Here.
Well, yesterday I dropped off the 24 $15 denominations Safeway cards to Maryland Avenue. So that will help them encourage families to come for the Maryland barbecue back to school night on the 2nd. We're going to be having, working with Ken, with other local presidents and area presidents on the 25th for Rotary Service Day. So please expect from me, we're going to send you the link to join, to come that day. Only just a slot, about 3 slots. You can just walk to pack, foods. It will be a very fun day on the 25th of September. There will be, we might have a taco truck, having fun, drinks for the Rotarians. It will be a lot of fun while we walk. So, the Rotary Service Day on the 25th for the September Hunger Awareness Month. We're going to pack food for people, but that will be a very fun event for Rotarians, even for the Rotarians, with a taco truck and drinks. I can even buy the beer if you want to. So, free vaccine in our clinic, September 25th at Main and Disney Park from 9 to 1. And that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Christian. September 5th, May Nissan Park, free vaccination for people that haven't had an opportunity to get a COVID vaccine yet and would like to. So, I don't know about that. I am not sure. Somebody in the audience, Mike Morgan, asked if that would include booster shots, and I do not know about that. Oh, but Sheila might. No, Sheila says no on the booster shots. Okay, so no, probably not an opportunity for booster shots yet. So, one other thing I just want to shout out. I didn't have a slide on this one, but if anybody that's in attendance would be interested in being a greeter as we go forward and we get back to actually having people meeting in person, please connect with Sonia. Let Sonia know if you would be interested in helping out that way. So, okay, Lynn, would you be willing to tee up our speaker for next week and then introduce our speaker for today?
It echoes a lot, doesn't it? All right, so next week we're going to have Jill Buck. She actually, it's a pretty big sounding name, her Go Green initiative, but some of you may remember Jill. She actually ran for Congress in this area several years ago, but this is something she's worked on for many years, and it's her Go Green initiative. And I thought that would be an interesting topic, so she'll be on Zoom next week. All right, hold on for a second. All right, so our speaker for today is our very own Trish Munro, who of course is the Vice Mayor of Livermore. And she's going to talk about the city council's subcommittee on equity and inclusion. I'm not going to steal too much of her thunder, so I'm just going to tell you what the subcommittee's objective is. And that is to enable equity and inclusion in Livermore through diverse community engagement that will result in a welcoming city, exemplified by equity of opportunity and just treatment for all. Let's welcome Trish Munro.
How would you like to do this? So bear with us, people, while we get Trish set up here.
Number one, I will not be able to do this unless there's like I get very sensitive to the response, which means I won't be able to represent.
Okay.
So in a way that the echo of the line, that'd be great.
Come here, Ken. Help. I've got PowerPoint to play.
Say again?
How do we get PowerPoint to play?
Usually up there somewhere. I don't see it on.
Yeah, I don't either.
yours. Down here.
Is that?
Right, and now.
Does that work for you, or would you like me to set it up on this screen?
You have to share screen.
I need to have a. And then if people on Zoom want to ask questions, if they can put them in the chat, that'd be great.
And you got page up, page down?
Mhm.
Page down.
Okay, great. Okay. All right.
Ken, you have to share.
Can everybody
screen
hear me
on that.
okay? All right. Can you hear me? If you can't hear me, put your hand up. Okay, I'm still getting a huge echo here. Can we like get rid of the echo, please? Alan, are we on mute somehow? I mean, can you get yourself on mute somehow, or? All right, I'll give it a try. Okay, this is not going to work. Okay, can people on? No, nobody can see anything. I'll wait. Let's. Wait, what?
Zoom people can hear Trish fine and we can see the slides fine. So I don't know what the in-room experience is, but on Zoom, it's all good.
What do you need?
Just what you undid. And all right, turn on your microphone and have a speak to your computer.
Okay,
Now,
so
I'm muted.
okay, turn on this microphone. Zoom. Zoom's not here. Zoom's not on. You're not on Zoom. It's the problem.
And your level was down. You have to bring
Right.
your level back up.
No, he's lost the Zoom connection. So.
Let me jump
Right,
in and
yeah.
see.
Now we can hear you very clearly.
Thank you all for your patience. I'm going to say that a bunch today, I think. Okay. So let me. Oh, well, there you go.
Okay, now. Hey, Zoom people, can you hear me? Put your thumbs up if you can. Excellent. All right, you can hear me. How about people in the room? You can hear me? Okay, now then all we need, I think, is to share a screen here. Let's see if this will work. Oh, look at that. Excellent. Now, how do I share the screen from here so that it's, I get this to, I can hear you.
What would you like to do?
I'm trying to, I want to get it full screen for them. And can we get full screen for the,
We see your presentation very clearly.
okay, but
Hear you.
people in the room can't see anything here. That's what I'm concerned about. How do I get?
What would you like to do?
I want to get this to the. I want them to be able to.
You want the Zoom?
I want them
bigger?
to, yeah, I want them to see the whole thing, so it's not.
I think they're looking at this.
Okay. All right.
Let me shut this down.
Sure. Okay, while Alan's putting that up, I can actually get started. I think. Oh, he's got it, but it's not. Okay, so I gotta wait. Okay. I can song and dance while we're waiting. These are the advantages or something of being the first at a hybrid meeting. I'm glad to be the guinea pig. Which microphone? I think there's two. That one? Turn that one off?
Zoom might not hear you.
Can Zoom hear me? Apparently Zoom can hear me. Okay, all right. We can go with that, but we still need like, you know, slides.
We can hear you.
If that's not working, do you want to try sharing that screen?
Well, hang on.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started regardless, and I'm going to just kind of try to talk you through this. So what I'm talking about is, because it's getting late, what I'm talking about is the equity and inclusion work that started in June 2022, last year, 2020, and then basically concluded stage one, or the subcommittee, July 26th of 2021, and then what the plans are for the future. So that's the plan. What I see next on my screen, which you probably can't see, is how we develop this. And so on the 22nd of June 2020, the council committed to review the Livermore Police Department and formed the Equity and Inclusion Subcommittee. At that point, it consisted of then Vice Mayor Bob Warner, he's now mayor, and that enters into this story a little bit, and me. And on the 27th of July, Bob and I spent some time talking to people, working out with staff, working out developing the program. The council ratified the equity and inclusion framework, the mission statement, and then the council asked us to gather community input. Well, community input was a working group. We put out applications and we got an overwhelming interest. Okay, so can you back up a little bit? We're not quite there yet. Keep going back up, way back, way back. Keep going. There we are. Okay. So council expanded the size of the working group from 18 to 48 people who applied. We just decided that this is equity and inclusion, we better start with being inclusive, so we did. And so the first part of this ended with the orientation meeting on the 15th of September. So now in the next slide. So this is the mission statement that Splend walked you through: foster equity and inclusion in Livermore through diverse community engagement that will result in a welcoming city, exemplified by equity of opportunity and just treatment of all. Now, I got to say that there may be questions about some of the language here. Hold those questions, you can ask them later. Let me just walk through this at the moment. So, okay, next slide. Nope, we're there, right there, great. So in looking at these 48 people who applied, they had different interests. And the interests extended beyond the policing. And if you think about the policing, police are a reflection of the community. So if you've got a problem in your community, you better look beyond where the police are. And that's in fact what this group did. And so we ended up with 4 different focuses. One was community culture and representation. That was really about education, what we look like, who we are, how we think, who we include and who we don't as a whole community. The second one was policing and human services. This is where we began, of course, so I'm not going to spend a lot more time on that. Reaching and inspiring younger generations. Well, there's a lot of interest from the students in schools, and the schools were working on these issues as well. But students go to school. Turns out they spend a lot of their time in school. Who knew? But they live most of their lives in community as well. So what is it that we as a community, as a whole city, do to engage, to reach those people who are going to become citizens very much quicker than any of us really think? And then finally, what I like to call the concrete areas of life. Those are the things that where we live, where we work, how we think about money, the economics, and how we get from place to place. These areas shape what we can do. They're the context in which we live. They are deeply implicated in equity and inclusion issues. So those were the 4 areas that we looked at. People sorted themselves into those groups. Some people joined more than one group. Some people stuck with one. And we ended up with around 10 people, 10 to 12 people per group across the board. And of course, people came and went. They weren't, it was not a stable group. I mean, there were people who stayed, there were enough people who stayed, but of course, all 48 did not. Phase 1 lasted from September 16th to December 9th. And during that time, each subgroup met 3 times. Each one developed a mission statement and goals and decided on a project to help meet those goals. Now, during this time, there was a whole lot of talking going on. We also discovered that there were 2 kinds of things going on. One was those people who really wanted to achieve a goal. They were in there, I have a project, I want to get it done, get me in, get me out. The other was like, I want to talk about my issues. I want to talk about how I feel. I want to talk about how my feelings affect everybody else, or how I represent everyone else. These actually really matter because how people feel is where we start with understanding what the problems are. So it wasn't a question of how you think about one or the other. It was a question of how do you accommodate both? And I'll get to that in phase 2. But where we recognized this really was towards the end, where we met for a storytelling session, which ended up, we wanted that to foster this better understanding among these diverse experiences. Until you walk in someone's shoes, how do you know how they feel? That's what that storytelling session is about. Okay, during this phase 1, this is what we came up with. Group A, this was their mission, how the visual and physical context shape how we treat each other. And so the first project that they came up with was how to think about the range of symbols in Livermore that reflect who we are, that reflect issues of systemic racism, but also equity and inclusion. Livermore's culture and heritage, how are different cultures represented in the community? And you may remember that there was a little kerfuffle about that. I'm going to skip over that unless you want to ask questions about it later, but it did inform how we went forward. It was also very hard, in this project is fairly, it's hard to wrap your arms around it. So this changed somewhat in phase 2. B was policing and human services. And so the mission there was to reimagine and better coordinate public safety for better outcomes, and started with 2 projects. And we ended up with 3 conclusions out of this. But one was to look at the use of force policies, and the other was to review the stop data. The use of force policies, by the way, was looking at the police manual, and that was accomplished fairly well and very successfully. This, by the way, was done with the absolute cooperation and support of the police department. We had members of the police department participate, and it was a very congenial, cordial relationship that continues. Reaching and inspiring younger generations. Again, this was a little bit diffuse in getting going. The goal was to provide these resources and engagement for youth in the intergenerational context. And we began with thinking about the use of affinity groups. Again, this changed somewhat. It got refined in phase 2. And finally, this one is great, big, huge issue. Housing, workplace, economics, and transportation. Well, the first thing the group did was to narrow it down to housing. So you can see that if that's where we narrowed it down to, then there's a lot of work that still can be done. The project was, people recognized they didn't understand the housing. And so they wanted a workshop series on affordable housing related topics in order to gain a baseline understanding before going out and engaging in the community. You have to understand what you don't understand first. So that's where we started. Okay. So that's where we at. And that's as far as we got with phase one. Phase two, oh, thank you for moving along. We received an update on January 11th. By this time an election had happened. We'd had a little kerfuffle. We'd moved things around. We were missing a council member because one council member had become mayor. And so we had received an update. We reopened the application period to add other members, and then waited until that council vacancy was filled. On the 25th, Mayor Bob Warner appointed Bob Carling to take his place, because being mayor, it turns out it's a big job. Who knew? And so we exchanged one Bob for the other. Bobs are not equal, just so you know. But they both did. It was really interesting to work with both people. I learned a huge amount and really appreciated having that experience. In February, after we then had a full complement with Councilmember Bonanno joining us, we reviewed and approved the plans for phase two, and then went through up through the 15th of June, and I'll get to what we did in that time in a minute, made recommendations, and then 6/21, the committee sunsetted, and 6/26 of this year, the council accepted the recommendations. So phase two, remember I said that we had two different pieces to that. One was the storytelling, one was the how do we get to know who we are. We integrated that into two different tracks. One was a storytelling track, and that's the 4 storytelling sessions. And then each subgroup met 5 times to refine and continue their mission and projects. Okay, next one. So this is where the community culture and representations went to. It explored the ways that the city could broaden the community participation in city government. So it went from being something fairly vague to being very specific. Okay, what can the city actually do to the city government, city staff, the city of Livermore do to affect change? And the answer was, let's look at advisory bodies and community volunteer programs and look at how they recruit, how they reach out, and how they include. So that was one piece. And so the other was to provide information to the subcommittee on making communication, media, and messaging welcoming, inclusive, and representative. And so this looked at external communication. Now, one of the things you may have noticed is that over the last 6 months or so, our communication has become multilingual. And so, or at least duolingual. We are now, as a matter of course, including Spanish, along with English. So that's one small way in which that's been started to be enacted. We've also looked at ways to include public art, cultural events, and then educational programs in that. Okay, so that was what their goals were. Policing and Human Services continued the work that was mentioned before. With the stop data, worked on benchmarking and analyzing the stop data. Oh, the looking at the use of force policies, that was completed before we began phase two. And so then we moved on to thinking about mental health integration, because this is an area where the police really wanted help. They are in a situation where they're being asked to do work that they're not trained for. And so this was already on the table in many ways, and the working group helped with that. Okay. Reaching and inspiring the younger generations. What we figured we should start with, after, again, thinking this through, is listening to the youth, and then asking the working group to recommend how to better engage, welcome, and include youth. And so that was done through getting a youth forum together. And this was through the high schools, through Las Positas, through LAAC, Livermore Area Youth Commission. I can never get all the letters correctly, but we reached out, we had them organize, we had them do the interviewing, they developed the questions, and then we listened. And we learned quite a bit from that as well. And again, that informed the recommendations. And then finally, the workshop series did take place. It was incredible. It made me recognize personally how much I had learned over the last few years. And I think it was instructive to watch members of the working group learn how complicated this whole area is. It made me recognize how much information still needs to be communicated to all of us as a community in terms of understanding the relationship between the state, the county, the city, the region, and all the complexities that go with that. So, and then we also we learned a great deal about the Livermore's context, the demographics, our housing inventory, and so on. So we've got Livermore context, we got the state legislative context, affordable housing requirements, and then a walkthrough that I think took 2 sessions actually on what our housing affordable projects look like, those that are in the pipeline, and how Livermore in general approaches these subjects. So those were the 4 recommendations. Now, or the 4, with the work of the 4 subgroups. And now to the recommendations. Now, the working group is an advisory body, so it did a lot of work. And one of the things that Councilmember Carling and I came away with was an understanding of what was missing, where there were questions that we took for granted, in areas we took for granted, but that were really unclear unless you have been around for 6 months or so. One of the things when you're elected to council, you find out that as new blood, you bring fresh eyes. Very quickly, those eyes become less fresh. This was a whole set of fresh eyes on a whole lot of topics. So that was very useful. And then the city staff went away and said, all right, what can we actually accomplish so that we actually could take away a number of measurables? And this is where what we came up with. And I've divided them into several categories. This is not a group by group recommendation. That's not how it broke out. This is topic by topic. So first is outreach, recruitment, and engagement. One of the big tools here is the things like Key to the City to build knowledge and engagement. And so Key to the City is this deep dive into what the city does, using that to expand community awareness of what local government's about. It also provides stepping stones to leadership opportunities. And then taking that program and tailoring it to youth in particular is another way to engage the youth in why it matters that they are involved in city government. And then increasing the scope of recruitment for these programs. So that was one area, is how do we reach out to all of our community to help make them feel connected to the city and understand it better. Employee, volunteer, and advisory body recruitment. So this is again an area where it's important to understand who you're reaching and how you're reaching them. And so, so this was another area of recommendation. Collaborations with city partners. Now, there was a lot that can be done, but a lot that the city isn't and can't be responsible for. But what the city can do is facilitate. And so this is where these collaborations come into play. So one area is just working with our partners, the school district, the LARPD. Las Positas should be on here. It's on here, I think, later on. And yeah, it's a few down. But walk with those to engage, work with school district and the park district to engage with and include youth in city programs. And then the complementary programming for youth with the school district, with the PTA, and with LARPD. The distinction there is one is just integrating youth into what's already going on. The other is to work specifically on programming that meets youth's needs, but is across the spectrum of the governmental bodies. And then with our non-governmental partners, Chamber of Commerce, the Las Positas, other business organizations, to develop youth training, basic job skills programs, and career opportunities, recognizing that there are many different paths towards work engagement. And then finally, developing a calendar of cultural events to share Livermore's cultural diversity. And again, this is a matter of reaching out to many different groups. So that's another second area. Third area. Housing and what we learned from the programs that were put on for the housing, for this group D, is that there's a lot of outreach that needs to happen. And so continuing to make that outreach happen. And then I wanted to add in that there's a lot that didn't happen because, again, this is a very big area. So y'all out there, there's work to be done. This is a really good place to do it in the workplace, in economics, and in transportation. And then finally, where it began with the police programs. The Stop Data project continues, and subgroup B will be continuing to hear the updates and provide input on that. We're implementing a mental health clinician ride-along pilot program and finding ways to deploy the police department resources. And then a chief's advisory group. And this is important because this isn't an oversight. This is a working with, continuing in the collaborative style that we established and that has worked really well for this city. Really made everybody, it's remarkable because people on all sides of the political spectrum participated in this group and all of them were happy with the results, which is pretty good work actually. So those were the areas that we considered, and here is what you can do. First of all, find those opportunities for collaboration with other groups. This is really important. Wherever you have groups, what can you do in those groups to make a difference? And then individually, have conversations with people who are different from you. Listen, speak, bring your life experiences to fore too, but understand that everyone comes from different life experiences, everyone has different skills and different abilities, and those together make up a great fabric that we all participate in. And then be inclusive. All right. So I think I've done that in about 15, 20 minutes, and there's time for questions.
Since we've never tried this part before, I'm going to maybe take a question from the audience first, and then I'm going to try and see if we've got some questions in Zoom. For those of you who are on Zoom, if you can either raise your hand to the bottom right hand here, or put something in the chat, and we'll come back to you in just 1 second. But here, we got a question from Mike Johnson. To help me, give me an example of systemic racism.
Well, so let's start with a definition of what systemic racism is. So systemic racism is systemic. And that means that it is something that happens through history and it happens through context. So one example of, so systemic racism, you can't fix systemic racism in Livermore. You can't fix systemic racism in yourself because it's systemic. So actually, I had somebody who accused me of calling them a systemic racist. And I'm like, so explain to me how this works because you're a person and we're talking systems here, so I'm not sure I understand this. But in a similar way, a city participates in a system in and of itself. And so if you think, so one example is housing. And if you look at the way that housing in the Bay Area developed, and if you look at the way some of the zoning practices developed, those practices, and in particular, I'm sure you're all familiar with redlining. But those practices and zoning, redlining is a method of lending. Zoning is how we think about where we put what kinds of houses. Those things contribute to who is able to buy houses, who is able to rent houses. Those things have systemically disadvantaged particular groups. That's an example of systemic racism.
Great. Any other questions here? Maybe some...
Yeah, I think, yeah. Hi, Hank. So quantitative measures of progress. So there are some quantitative measures of progress and there are some that aren't. This is actually a real problem with when you look at something like cultural shift, it's quantitative doesn't necessarily work. Because how do you measure, how do you determine what you measure? Sometimes what you measure isn't what actually measures change. Now, something like I was talking about before with systemic racism in housing, you could measure, for example, what the racial and ethnic diversity within Livermore is, and you could say, over time, we want to change that, and that's a measure of progress. I'm not saying that we need to do that, but that is one way to approach it. David, the question was, what are the quantitative measures of progress? The previous question was, what's systemic racism? So that would be one way to measure it. But the question I would ask is, does that actually accomplish what you want it to accomplish? Let's imagine that I said, what I want to do is I want to increase the Black population in Livermore to 10%. And I do that, but you know, what I'm hearing from those people who moved into town is they're not having a happy time here because people are being mean to them. How do you measure that? That's really hard to quantify. What you want to do is you want to think about the how we treat each other in more general terms. So some things you can quantify, some things you can't. And we do have, with regard to, for example, the police stop data, that's incredibly quantitative and also very difficult, which is why we've hired a consultant to work with on that, because the other thing with quantitative data is it's complicated. So I know that's not a very satisfying answer, but sorry about that. Should I keep going with?
So
we are just about to in the end. Next steps in the process. Well, the next steps in the hang on one second. The next steps in the process, I think I talked about, which are enacting, the city is working on putting together the work plan for the recommendations. And I've already asked, I've already mentioned what you can do, which is to work to engage your groups as we move forward on the collaboration. But one of the pieces of this is communication. So, all right, and Christian, yeah.
Yeah, so I want to break this culture. Even my own in Nigeria, we have, whites, classics, and everybody, in America, Nigeria, many other white friends. After I came to the United States, I never gave one place to go to it. I'm experienced with the person. What I did in my workplaces, so corporate America, so to speak. Time for now, employees. So my question is, a lot of people are unaware. They're not just the way they were raised. They're not racist in nature, but the way they were raised, they are totally insensitive of their surroundings or what's going on. Are you going to incorporate sensitivity training so that people are aware that what they're doing is racist? So that's a challenge. Some people that are completely unaware, they do things because that's what they know and growing up with.
So the question was, I'm going to try to summarize it. Tell me if I get it right. If effectively it's around when you're raised in a culture, you incorporate that culture into your life, and you are unaware maybe of how your behavior affects other people, and so how is part of what the city is going to do incorporate training to better help people better understand those issues. So there's two parts to that. I'm sorry, I'm running over, I know. Is that okay?
we're going to try and wrap it up.
Okay, well, I'll try to wrap it up. The short answer is yes, the city will do that, but it's a longer question because there's questions around education. There's this is a question that goes out to all of you. So for example, the question around systemic racism that's a matter of understanding. That's a larger question around how do we think about that. Another question is when you think about what, there's a great story that professor at Stanford, a Black professor at Stanford who studies implicit bias, tells about going on a plane with her 5-year-old son who was concerned. This is a Black woman and her Black son who's concerned because the child sees a Black man and is worried that Black man is going to be harmful to him. And the mother looks at her son and says, that man is like your father. Would your father hurt you? So implicit bias is something that affects all of us. This is a matter of a culture. And so it is a matter of how we treat each other and how we train each other. And it's something that all of us need to do. The city can do some of it, but this would be a place where those collaborations could help as well. I think I'm done, and I'm sorry I've run over. There you go.
Okay, people. So I want to thank everybody. This was tricky. I think we did a pretty darn good job for our first stab at this. So Alan, especially, I want to single you out. The complex mess of technology that we're trying to figure out here was not easy. I think this went off really well, all things considered. Having said that, we will continue to try and improve. So before I let everybody go, Jay Davis had offered to stick around and talk about if there's anybody in the room that has questions or wants to talk about wedding v. CalPERS, the long-term care settlement and stuff, if anybody's interested and wants to hang out and talk about that stuff. For all of you that joined us on Zoom today, thank you, thank you, thank you. Again, send me your feedback. We will continue to work on this and try and get better. So hang on one second.